An error occurred. We'll try again. Is there a full moon? All right, here we go. We'll try again. Oh, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. We have two very special guests with us tonight, and they are the authors of the RAND report. Many of you out there know about the RAND report, and the article, one of their recent articles, is What's Missing from Teachers' Toolkits to Support Student Reading in Grades 3 to 8. And the authors are here with us today, and they are Anna Shapiro and Rebecca Sutherland. And there is one more author as well, and her name is Julia Kaufman. Kaufman or Kaufman? Well, I have a friend with the last name Kaufman, so same spelling. Anyhow, let's introduce Anna first. Anna Shapiro is an associate policy researcher at the RAND Corporation with a focus on early childhood education and special education. Her research interests include strengthening early care and education systems, increasing access to high-quality public early learning opportunities, improving the educational experiences of children receiving special education services, and children with developmental differences. Rebecca Sutherland is the Associate Director of Research at AERDF. Rebecca Sutherland is an experienced qualitative and quantitative researcher who's built a career working in public education at both the state and local district levels, along with some stints at national ed nonprofits that partner directly with districts and schools. And she is leading the charge of the Reading Reimagined research. So let's bring them both in. Judy and I read your article and the key findings, and I'd like to start off with one of the key findings from the report. It says here, grades 3 to 8 teachers, let me just see, estimate that 44% of their students always or nearly always experience difficulty reading the written content within their instructional materials. 44%. Wow. So let's talk about that. How did you come up with this? It looks like you interviewed the teachers and got their perspectives, but I'd like to hear from both of you. Doesn't matter who we start with, Anna or Rebecca. Just unmute and get started.
Well, thanks so much for having us. I can start with a little bit of the background about the research itself, which I think will help us understand the findings a little bit better. So this report is based on a survey that was administered to a random sample of 3rd through 8th grade teachers in the United States. And then we used the survey responses, and we used some kind of statistical weighting procedures to produce nationally representative estimates of teachers in these grades. So when we're thinking about interpreting these results, we can say that across the country, a nationally representative sample of teachers in grades 3 through 8 estimate that 44% of their students always or nearly always experience difficulty reading. And so one of the benefits of this is that we can feel pretty confident that these estimates are nationally representative, and they do give us a pretty strong insight into the challenges that teachers are facing in these older grades and how many teachers are experiencing kind of on the day-to-day, these are not just English language arts teachers as well. So these are teachers in other subjects who are experiencing their students are having difficulty reading the written material. So it might be a science teacher is saying, yeah, a lot of my kids are really struggling with reading their biology textbook, for example.
Rebecca?
Yeah, thanks. So the motivation for this survey study is that Reading Reimagine's research agenda is focused on foundational literacy skills for students in grades 3 through 8. And I can talk about that more later if there's interest there. But as part of that research agenda, teachers are an important part of students' literacy instruction experiences. And so we wanted to know how prepared, in terms of training and in terms of resources available to them, are teachers in that grade span of 3 through 8 for providing instructional support to students who need it, who still need it in foundational literacy skills. So we partnered with RAND to craft the survey and undertake the study. And maybe Anna wants to speak a bit about, how do we find these teachers? And we didn't just, randomly stop people as they were leaving schools and ask them to take a survey.
Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So Judy Boxner, my wonderful co-host. Judy, let's think about that. 44% of students struggle with written content in grades 3 to 8. And so we know, obviously, difficulties start in K-2, but then somehow we expect this is all going to be worked out by 3rd grade. That really doesn't make much sense. What are some of your thoughts after reading this report, Judy?
So, being in the field every single day, which I still do, I'm seeing this is truly a reality. This is not a made up report. And it's becoming more apparent to me every day because I technically support K-2 in my building because there's another literacy coach that supports the upper grades. And unfortunately, I'm always getting text messages on the down low because people know how obsessed I am with the foundational skills. That's my big jam. I mean, I love the other pillars of literacy, but I'm getting a lot of upper grade teachers that are extremely frustrated. They feel very alone, not just in my school, but citywide, nationwide. They feel very alone. They don't feel prepared. They don't feel equipped. They feel very overwhelmed because a lot of their literacy block focuses a lot on the knowledge building piece with curriculums such as Wit and Wisdom, HMH, expeditionary learning, core knowledge, and not a lot of time is allotted to the foundational piece because the assumption is that most of the kids, when they get to, the upper grades, have broken the code. But the reality is that in many schools, including my own, unfortunately, at this point still, we're making a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of gaps. Change takes time. I'm seeing a lot of upper grade kids that can't read. And I'm seeing 4th graders that are still having trouble, unfortunately, with letters, sounds, breaking the code, decoding. I myself went into a classroom today where, it was 4th grade kids. It was a special education class, but the kids are bright as can be. They're dying to learn. They're bright, but I had to show them how to take a word, to take their finger and slide through a word and make the sounds. And it makes you wonder, I'm a pretty strong literacy coach, but somehow these kids are still slipping through the crack. And, how did a kid get so far that they don't even know what to do when they see a word and to make the sound? And then I feel really bad because, the upper grade teachers, they really want to help these kids, but they're not given a lot of time. A lot of them are not given the resources that they need. A lot of them are told, go find the resources on your own. You have a half hour a day for small group instruction, fill that void. And, they just feel defeated. And even myself, it's like, I don't know what to recommend. Do they, use a program like PAF or another program or another Spire, or do they just do their own thing? And then there's the demands that they get from administrators to be on grade level content with all this rigor. And then, okay, the kids may understand that rigor, but those same kids may not be able to read during that literacy block. So I see a great level of frustration from educators and a great level of frustration from teachers. And I think that a lot of administrators care, but they're also extremely overwhelmed and they have so much to do. And I don't think enough of the attention is being put on the upper grade students that are struggling. And I don't think that urgency is as great as it is for the little kids. And it's frightening because they're only going to be in elementary school for a little bit, a short window of time. And it makes you wonder, like, people think, oh, this problem is going to be solved later. It may very well not be solved later.
So, Judy, you said a lot, and a lot of it was reflected in this report, right? I mean, I'm listening to what Judy said, and she's right on target, and it aligns exactly with what the two of you said. Essentially, teachers are overwhelmed by all this. They're not equipped to handle this, whether it's with the tools, resources, training. They really just don't have the wherewithal right now to handle this, especially when they have grade level content that they have to cover. So in your research and interviewing teachers, what did you find from the teachers in terms of some of the things that they were saying to you? And I read the report, but I'd like to hear from you so you could tell our listeners some things that you found out, some things that could have been surprising. Were there any surprising findings? And, what did you learn from doing this interviewing that maybe, you had to think twice about now?
So this was, we didn't actually have a chance to speak to any of the teachers. This was a survey. So we weren't speaking kind of off the cuff with teachers. We were asking them to respond to questions that we developed as survey items. So just want to make that clear. So I would love to hear what Anna found surprising. I think the thing that was probably the most surprising to me is that, so we've already shared the finding that, 40 teachers in the survey report that on average 44% of their students nearly always or always struggle with written material, but more than half of class time is dedicated, per these teachers in the survey, more than half of their class time is dedicated to independent reading and writing activities. So there's such a mismatch there. And I'm sure that a lot of that is driven by, as Judy was naming, the curriculum that they are required to work in and the standards that they are absolutely expected to be teaching to. And, just that dearth of time so that they don't have a lot of choice about the instructional moves that they're able to make. But the fact of the matter is that they know that their students are struggling with reading and writing, and yet they are spending the majority of instructional time expecting their students to do just that.
Yeah, I think another thing that kind of stood out to me looking at these survey responses was that we had a lot of teachers saying, both in this survey and in a previous study that we conducted, we had a lot of teachers in these older elementary and middle school grades telling us that they were spending a fair amount of time teaching foundational reading skills. But in this survey, what we found was that a pretty large percent of teachers held misconceptions about how foundational reading skills are developed. So 37% of elementary teachers in our sample held at least one misconception, and 45% of middle grades teachers. And I think that that really underlines kind of the gap between what teachers are feeling like they need to do in the classroom because they're perceiving in the moment, this is a challenge for my students, I need to be doing something, but they also probably did not get the pre-service training and foundational reading skill development that an early grade teacher would have gotten. They're not getting the same type of professional learning. And so we have this kind of mismatch between, what the teachers are feeling called to do in the classroom and what kind of tools teachers are being provided to have like the most cutting edge resources of knowledge that they need to teach those skills effectively.
Yeah, I found that really, really interesting that, they're saying that half the time, more than half the time, these kids are expected to read, and yet they know they can't read. And so, what are the kids actually doing during that drop everything and read time? Probably not too much pretend reading. So, Judy, I know that you and I have spoken about coaching and going into work with some teachers sometimes in the upper grades, even though that generally you are K to 2, but they are looking to you for help for foundational skills instruction. Even though that's what's expected in K to 2, they see a need for it, but don't really know what to do. So, what do you tell those teachers, Judy?
Sometimes I'm apologizing because my, at work, my primary responsibility is K to 2, but I try to juggle behind the scenes and still make time for some people. Like today, I made time for a 4th grade teacher because, it's really rewarding when you see somebody advocating for kids, and it's very hard to say no. So I went into his classroom today and I watched him. My principal said, release some responsibility. You can't just always give to people. I'm a giver a little bit. And he said, let him try to do something. And it was hard because you definitely see that there is a learning curve for teachers. They didn't have the professional training that I was lucky to have. I had 8 years of intensive structured literacy support, and it's hard to see because you want to catch people up to speed fast, but learning sometimes takes time. And the truth is that these kids are only in our care for such a short window of time. And it's like you feel this tremendous guilt. And then, it's funny, and I don't usually like to talk about my own workplace because it might not be the most professional thing to do, but it is called real life, right? I'm still an educator in the field, and I'm sure I'm expressing the concerns of a lot of people. So we're like sitting at a table at work, and, decisions are being made about who to provide additional services to. And it's almost like, and I think this happens in all schools. No, let's get the services for the ENL kids. No, let's get the services for the bilingual students. No, let's get the, and then somebody's like, hey, what about the upper grade students? And then sometimes you'll hear, no, we got to wait. We got to do things step by step. And I get that, but it makes me frustrated with the whole system in general, the educational system in this country. No child should have to wait for their care. No child should have to wait for their turn to get what they're entitled to. And I'm telling you, this happens everywhere. It's everywhere. It seems like there's not enough manpower, not enough resources. And I get mad because I think, like, at the federal level, we've done so much to like make sure that schools are incorporating structured literacy. But my biggest frustration is that I don't think MTSS systems and RTI systems are well designed nationwide.
Just let me interrupt you. So that's, RTI, response to intervention. Let's just tell people, listen.
Yeah. And the newer name is MTSS, multi-tiers of systems of support. It's an area of frustration. I think that, it systematically can be thought of what's working, what's not working, how to structure it, what to do. And I feel like there's no clear roadmap, and every school is just shuffling and shuffling. What do we do? Who do we see? When do we progress monitor? Who do we help? It's disgusting. It makes me, you know what it is? It's actually bullshit.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm thinking about all of this. I'm thinking how it's so unfair to the teachers teaching these grades. It's like setting them up for failure, that they're being given a job to do. They have a 5th grade curriculum, 6th grade curriculum. And then, they see these problems and they don't have time to address it or the know-how. So you're right, that is BS. That is definitely BS. So let's talk about personal experiences. That was one of the key findings, that basically, since the teachers did not really get this training in the upper elementary school grades, middle school, they're kind of going by their own personal experiences. Could you talk a little bit about what you saw when you sent that survey out and you saw that? Just curious.
Yeah. So for listeners who haven't read the report, we had a question on the survey that said, we asked teachers, where did you learn the most of what you know about reading? And then they had a set of options: personal experiences with students in the classroom, professional learning, other teachers or mentors, pre-service training, their own research, a curriculum or program, or they could say that they don't remember. And we found that 46% of teachers said that where they learned most of what they know about reading was their own personal experiences with students in the classroom. About 22% said professional development, and then only 6% said pre-service training. And I think that's not necessarily surprising, because these are teachers in grades 3 through 8. And I think in many states, a foundational skills course is not going to be part of a pre-service training program for a middle school teacher, for example. But I do think I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought we would have many more teachers reporting that they were learning from kind of more formalized sources like professional development, or from other teachers or mentors. But I'm curious what Rebecca thinks about that.
Yeah, so I think that both the survey finding and just what Judy, you've been sharing, points to systemically a need to really rethink how we're approaching collectively. This is not just on like one group of people. Collectively, how we're thinking about reading instruction for older grades. This is everyone's job. And if you're a 7th grade science teacher and your students can't read the word photosynthesis, I think you're going to want them to be able to read that word, and many others besides. And so helping that teacher feel situated to be able to help his or her students engage with their grade level text, and actually be able to, as we, that old chestnut of after grade 3, kids are reading to learn. Well, that's only going to happen if they can read. So we need to really rethink how we're supporting teachers so that kids can read to learn.
Yeah, interesting. When I was part of Reading First, which was a federally funded grant that was sent to targeted districts in need of help, one of the things that we walked away with is every teacher is a reading teacher. That was something they said again and again. It didn't matter if you were a content area teacher, upper grades. The whole idea was every teacher is a reading teacher, whether they see themselves as reading teachers or not. We really all need some basic understanding of how to help these kids read. And that example, Rebecca, of photosynthesis, I mean, yeah, that's basic stuff if you're in a science class, to be able to read those types of words and break it apart and look at meaningful word parts. It's so important. Something else that came up, Judy and I had on 2 experts, James and Diane Murphy, recently for adolescent literacy. And what they said was, in your report, you had mentioned that researchers found positive effects for more personalized approaches, such as one-on-one tutoring. And basically for these older kids, one-on-one and having individualized instruction is so important. Yet most of the time, we're not seeing that happen. Are we? I don't think so. most of the time kids are not being pulled for one-on-one tutoring within a school district. So, Judy, I just want to circle back to you for a moment. In this report, they also talked about that 3/4 of teachers feel they need more resources and support, including more reading specialists, more, tutors for that one-on-one help, and then actual materials like digital materials. They mentioned a whole bunch of things here. Did any one of these recommendations that were actually suggestions that they would like to have resonate with you as a coach?
1,000%. I mean, there's never enough books, right? You'll order some books for K-2, but then the upper grades are like, where are our decodables? We have kids that can't read either. And, as the science of reading, is a big part of the way we're supposed to be shifting, do those classrooms have materials that align with the science, right? They shouldn't have those level books in their classrooms for the kids that can't read. They shouldn't have those pattern books. So I think there's a big learning curve. I think that there's a mismatch in terms of the resources the upper grades have versus the lower grades right now in a lot of locations. I myself find that I'm photocopying a lot of my, materials for those teachers. And, yes, it's better than nothing. And I'm happy that I'm seeing teachers use, passages that are decodables and so forth, but it's a struggle. And teachers in general, nationwide, are extremely frustrated right now. There are so many demands on teachers right now, especially with the rollout of all these new quote unquote curriculums, programs, whatever we call them. I know there's a big difference, but some are better designed than others. Some programs, and I will give the example of the one at my site, is not fully scripted. So on top of those teachers in the upper grades having to, write lesson plans, now the new demand seems to be like everybody seems to expect slides. I never did slides when I was in the classroom, but now teachers are writing lesson plans. They're making slides. Then they have to make a lesson for small group instruction. Sometimes, and if they're not given a program like Spire or PAF or Foundations Intervention or Wilson, now they're writing another lesson plan. I mean, teachers are only people, and they're entitled to have a weekend. They're entitled to have dinner with their families. They're entitled to go to the gym after work, but it seems like it's never enough. And what I'm seeing from a lot of teachers in the system in general is they're burnt out, they're frustrated, they get very little positive affirmations, and they're always being told to do more and more and more. But when are teachers going to get more and more from the system? When are teachers going to get the support they deserve? When are kids going to get more support? I mean, it is so disheartening to know that we have kids that are going up to high school. I mean, Faith and I hosted an episode recently where we had teenagers begging on social media. Teenagers don't really want to come on social media to talk about that they have reading difficulties. We had 3 teenagers that were able to speak and say, hey, we had a really hard time learning how to read. And we didn't learn how to read till later in life. So,
right. That was another one, right?
Yeah, exactly. We have a big problem on our hands. And this is just a podcast, right? We do an hour show. What happens after the podcast? Are principals really listening? Are you there, principals? Hi. I mean, we know the researchers are listening, right? You guys write articles Faith and I hope to be the bridge to practice to bring these things to life in the classroom. But I don't know. I don't think that the urgency is there. And I think that the urgency is not there enough for the older kids. And, I also see like in the classroom, so they're given, you got to expose them to grade level content. That's all fine and dandy, but what does independent practice look like? Okay, so the kid couldn't read the text that you just did the I do, we do, you do. And now they have to go do independent practice. So now you see administrators say, you need to differentiate. Well, you know what? If all these programs were so fine and dandy, why are we having to differentiate so much? So now you're giving teachers another 5 million tasks to do. So you know what? I call that bullshit. Let's take care of our teachers and let's take care of our kids. I'm kind of angry tonight, Faith.
I
feel a little
see.
angry.
You want an angry chick. Wow.
I must have had a shitty day today.
Or maybe hearing about all this just makes you sick.
You know what? Because unlike other podcasters who left the field a long time ago, we're still in the trenches every day. So when you see this every day and you breathe this every day and you see these faces of kids that verbally tell you, I can't read. Right before a lesson today, I had a kid say, I can't read. These kids know that they can't read.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your graph. It's in the article, it says percentage of teachers with access to tools and training to support students having difficulty reading by grade level. And it looks like it says tools to help me identify struggling readers and staff to identify struggling readers were at the top, right? So basically, these kids are falling through the cracks and they are not equipped to pick that up easily, right? So they would like to have something or someone helping them to identify those kids who are falling through the cracks. And then as far as training resources, at the top of the list was training to help improve students' reading comprehension and training to help improve students' reading fluency. And then third up was training to help students access grade level texts. But I guess if they had training in comprehension and fluency, they would be able to access the texts. No? I don't know. That would make sense to me that would, follow. But, that was at the top of the list. And then there were other things as well. So what would you suggest? You did the report. Now, what would each one of you recommend after looking at this? What is it that teachers and in particular administrators need to walk away? As Judy said, if they're out there, administrators listening, what advice would you give them after doing a report like this?
So I can start at the higher level and then Rebecca can speak more to kind of the people in the schools. So I think you guys have both kind of pulled out what our biggest takeaway from these findings was, which is that the older students are getting left behind in the conversation that we're having about improving reading in American schools. And so we know that a lot of folks are really focused on this right now, but they're really focused on K2. And because there's been so much focus on K2, we're really forgetting about the kids in the older grades who have already fallen through the cracks, and they too need support because they too need to learn to read. So when we're thinking about kind of at a systems level and what state legislators are doing, a lot of the kind of reading laws, some of them, of course, mandate specific approaches to reading instruction or changes to pre-service training. But a lot of what these laws are doing is also just providing additional resources to schools. And they're providing those resources primarily to K-3 teachers with that goal of, once everyone gets past third grade, they're all going to be able to read. And so one of our big takeaways was that if you're trying to make kind of system-wide reform that includes expanding funding for reading instruction, it really needs to include these kids in older grades, in grades 3 through 8, and even in 9 to 12, so that teachers in these middle grades who in our report are saying, I need more of these resources, I need all of these things. I mean, very large percentages of them are saying that. And so when you're thinking about like what can states do when they're passing these new laws, when they're changing the way that they're funding their public schools, our biggest recommendation on that front is really just do not forget about the teachers and the kids in these older grades, because they too need these resources. And they're telling us in loud voices that this is something that is a big miss right now.
Plus 100 to everything Anna just said. And then for recommendations for building leaders and then individual teachers, as you noted, Faith, the top named tool and resource that teachers reported needing to have in their schools are tools to help them identify struggling readers. And I think that that is the most powerful thing to leverage initially, recognizing that usually foundational skills screeners are only administered in the early elementary grades. And then older students, if they're flagged to be tested, if they are identified through some means for possible tier 2 intervention, then their foundational skills might be tested. But it's usually not standard practice to administer a foundational skills screener to all the 5th graders, to all the 7th graders. Definitely not a standard practice in middle schools. And just to make the case for resource allocation in terms of instructional materials, in terms of instructional time, and of course, training for teachers, getting a handle on the scope of students' existing learning needs would be tremendously helpful in making that case to building leaders. And it would also give teachers, it might not be a pretty picture initially, but it would actually help them know, okay, so actually, yes, some of the students in your class are able, they're past the decoding threshold. They can engage with grade level text and read for comprehension. Yes, you can expect that group of students to do independent reading. And you should still be engaging with them to support their learning and their understanding of what they're reading. But you have this other group of students who maybe they're going to have more variable learning needs than students in kindergarten or 1st grade who are all kind of starting out on the same path. A 5th grade student, you could have 2 5th grade students who are both struggling with reading, and one of them might have basic phonics of the type that's tested by a test like DIBELS, which is designed and very nicely tests the phonics knowledge of early elementary school students. So you might have a student that seems on a test like DIBELS to have decoding down, but can't decode multisyllabic words, and still needs explicit decoding support so that they can actually read their 5th grade social studies textbook. So being able to differentiate between the level of need that different students who are both struggling have would be really helpful for teachers, even if they're only starting on their journey for supporting foundational literacy skills in their students. So yeah, assessment is what I would recommend.
Okay, so I'm curious, Judy, in your building, you have a cadence. Doesn't a cadence go up to sixth grade, 8th grade? Doesn't it? Isn't benchmark?
All right. So I have good news.
Okay.
So I actually helped my upper grade teacher today. We took the initiative on our own. We started screening kids that are in 4th grade special ed, self-contained. A lot of people in the system don't know that even if your school is using a screener like the Cadence, they think that it's only K-2. In my database, I see our school has like over 600 students. All the kids are in there. So I'm actually able to benchmark all the kids. And also progress monitoring is available to all the kids, even if I'm not using it as my primary screener at my site. And that's for everybody in New York City, actually. So it's a totally underutilized resource, though. I don't think many people know that. And,
that's a good point. That's
a lot of upper grade teachers have never been trained in what is a screener, how to use. I mean, I showed somebody once and they didn't buy into it, but they never really experienced it. They don't even know. They didn't get the training. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than doing an oral reading fluency with an older kid and seeing what happens and what happens when they encounter text. And then, wait, one more thing, Faith. The teacher saw that I also printed out progress monitoring for nonsense word fluency. the person's eyes, the teacher lit up. They didn't even know what nonsense word fluency was a couple of weeks ago, but they've been trying to implement lessons to teach kids how to decode CVC words. And they're like, wait, I could do this? So I don't think system-wide, though, that a lot of people know that they could screen older kids.
Okay, so I can tell you that I've seen a lot of schools administer ORF, oral reading fluency benchmarks, and yet they don't drill down to really understand why the score is low. So the score could be low because the child just reads slowly, or the child could have a low score. As you said before, Rebecca, maybe they can't read multisyllable words, or maybe, they're inaccurate. There are different reasons why that score could be low. And then they could actually score and benchmark okay, because if they read quickly enough, even if they make mistakes, the score could actually be benchmark. But yet, if you really listen to them, they're not reading with any expression. They're not stopping at punctuation. They're just getting words correct. And if you don't know what you're looking at, then the tool is useless.
I want to just chime in with another piece of information that I think our viewers will find useful. So Acadians was kind enough to visit my school. Shout out to Julie Nixon from Acadians that actually visited me. And, she explained, and I kind of knew this, but she reminded to me, so if you have a 4th grader or a 5th grader, you could start them at 5th grade passages, but you could also progress monitor them by going back and seeing where they are. You could then go back to the 4th grade passages, see how they did there. If that's too hard, you could go back to the 3rd grade. 3rd grade's too hard. And you could actually go back to phonemic awareness, phoneme segmentation, fluency. So I think that that's an important reminder for people. Just because, you may have tested them on their grade level, that doesn't mean you can't use those systems, whether it be Dibbles or Acadians or other systems. You could always, test back, because you need to, like Faith was saying, you need to get to the root of what's going on.
Yeah. And I also think it's ridiculous. Could you imagine that 5th grader who keeps getting progress monitored at grade level, and you keep seeing the same low score? And so what is that telling you? So I don't think people realize this, or at least some. I don't think, as Judy said, there's enough training in the upper grades in terms of what you look for and those real foundational skills, and how to drill down to get to the heart of what's going on. So I want to bring it back to both of you, Anna and Rebecca. In the report, one thing that teachers would like is some help for parents as well. That was in the report, that they would like parents to get some training too. So how would this be done? Through like a parent university? Would it be the school providing the parents? I mean, if the school themselves are having problems, who's going to do this training for parents? I mean, I find that to be very interesting. Based on the survey information, I don't think I would want teachers who have holes in their understanding training parents. So what, could you both talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our interpretation of that finding was that might be more indicative of just teachers giving kind of like a bat signal of like, I need help. I need help from whoever could help me. And so that might feel like, okay, maybe if the parents could help, that would be great. Then the parents can help. So I don't think, and I think we were pretty intentional about not kind of reading too much into that as a suggestion that was something that, like you're saying, like that schools should be going out and training parents. I don't think our interpretation was really more that like, this is just a strong signal that teachers are feeling like, I need more help, and from wherever I can get it. But I don't know, Rebecca, if you have anything to add on that front.
No, I mean, I guess the only other thing that occurs to me is that there are parents who are very actively concerned about their students reading and want to do what they can and are actively asking teachers and anyone else, well, what can I do? What can I do at home? I already read to them at night. We always have, so they're wondering what more they can be doing. And so it's possible that maybe some of the responses on that item were teachers expressing, I don't know how to answer them, but that they would like to, have some ideas in their pocket for when parents express that wish.
I think parents are underutilized. I think people don't give parents enough credit. And just like you said, well, I'm reading to them, I read aloud, or you know what? Parents could practice with them too. I'm not saying that every parent has the time or maybe, they're able to, but there are plenty of parents, begging for, the information so that they could do some of this. I mean, I don't think we should keep parents from helping if they want to help.
Can I chime in on that one after Faith?
Yes. Yeah.
So actually, this is so amazing. Everything's, relating to my own personal life today. So I have to say, I work in a very poor school district, probably one of the poorest districts in the country. And I have to happily announce that we had about 85 parents, at least 85 parents come in this morning, not this morning, yesterday morning. We had a foundational skills discovery day for parents, where parents were invited into the classrooms to see our foundational skills literacy block. It was for K-2. Parents were high-fiving me, okay, that they have never seen an event that was so special and meaningful to them. They all walked home with resources on how to support their children. And we know, and Faith is the biggest advocate for that parent connection. I mean, Faith has written her books about that and so forth, and she's just the biggest advocate and cheerleader for parents in this space. But we know the research shows that schools are going to do much better if there's a connection between, what's happening at home and what's happening in school. And, I've worked in many other poor schools, and I have never seen parents in the building. And it almost felt like the administrators gave up. And in my building, the principal did not give up. And he made it the most special event. They had a raffle, giveaways, they got sweatshirts, resources. But the biggest thing that the parents walked away with was the knowledge of what their kids are learning and what they could support their kids with. And yes, maybe the parents won't go home as experts in the, in the programs that we're utilizing. But think about it. These kids are coming home with posters. Now there's going to be a conversation. We told the parents, hang up these posters. I had parents that were so excited that came up to me and said, you mentioned the scope and sequence, and this is in a very poor school district. Can you send me the scope and sequence? I would definitely love to see it. So we have to, like Faith said, give our parents a lot more credit. I think it's an implicit bias when we say that our parents can't handle this. They can. They could handle it in poor districts. They could handle it in rich districts. They could handle it if the parents are Black, white, Chinese, gay, lesbian, whatever parents are, they are entitled to know what their kids are learning. And also, I'm going to make it a personal goal, and this show is not about me, but I'm hoping to inspire some other people. When that data is round up, tomorrow's the last day of collecting data, I'm going to have a data interpretation meeting with my parents to explain what the data is, how to look at the data. I think we have to start setting the bar higher and informing our parents, and not saying, oh, this is a poor district, the parents don't care. It's not true.
I'm cheering you, Judy. Big cheers on that one. That is awesome. Definitely. So to finish up, one thing you pointed out near the end of your article was something I found very interesting. You said that state tests, where are they? They're not intended to be diagnostic, right? And you said that you can't look to these types of tests to inform, teachers what they're supposed to do. So let's just talk a little bit about that part. So for the upper grades, you said here, unlike in early elementary grades, very few states allocate specific resources to support diagnostic literacy testing of students for reading difficulties in older grades. So just like Judy was talking about what she's doing in K-2 and bringing parents in and exposing them to what foundational skills are, what do we do 3 to 8 or above, as far as the diagnostic piece goes? So you could assess, but then how do we really get to the heart of this? Can we talk a little bit about this, since clearly this was something in your article that is problematic? So probably, parents are thinking to themselves, so what are these state tests really doing if you can't use it for that purpose, right? Let's hear about that.
Yeah.
Cheers, Dave.
State tests are summative tests that are administered at the end of the year. And so by the time the data is available, the student has moved on to the next grade usually. So teachers are getting the data from their students' previous year of instruction. So it's definitely not telling them how students are responding to the instruction they're currently receiving in the classroom. Judy, I'm so excited to hear that the district that you're working in does make Acadians available to all of the teachers in the elementary building. That's great. I would say that's a great place to start. And for the kids who still have gaps in their early foundational literacy skills, a test like Acadians can definitely identify and help educators know where these students still need support. But going back to what we were talking about earlier with multisyllabic decoding, for example, a test like DIBELS is not going to flag that because it's not testing higher order decoding skills that we really are only starting to characterize as decoding skills, things like morphology knowledge or the ability to read more complicated abstract syntax, the kinds of long sentences with lots of embedded clauses that you would never ask a first grader to read, but you might very well be asking a seventh grader to read. So a test that is actually designed to not just test the foundational skills that are associated with the K-2 or 3 span, but also then the skills that are associated with multisyllabic decoding, so morphology in particular, can really provide teachers with a lot of insight to where a lot of their students might actually be struggling, that it isn't necessarily with basic phonics, but with higher order skills for things that were not covered in first and second grade. So there are tests that are designed to test those skills and validated for older students. One of them is the Read Basics test that ETS designed. It's on the market. I think it's called CAPTI, CAPTI. And then there's also the Rapid Online Assessment of Reading that is developed and run by Stanford University's Graduate School of Education, and that's free. So the ROAR test is something that it's modular, so that if you just want to administer, say, single word recognition and sentence reading efficiency to all of your 6th and 7th graders, you can do that using ROAR in 15-minute blocks. So instead of having to allocate an hour to do a full screener to all of the students in 6th and 7th grade, you could do it in chunks. And that would certainly give you a starting point for identifying where older students' learning needs lie.
Rebecca, if you could send us the names of those assessments and diagnostic tools, that would be fabulous. And we could add that into the show notes. Anna, any thoughts about the testing, whether it's, a benchmark, progress monitoring, diagnostic, and what you had mentioned in terms of just maybe the tests are not doing what they need to do for teachers. They're not designed for that. Just like you wouldn't use, a spoon for a certain task when you're eating, when you need a fork. The test isn't designed for that. So any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think that the kind of like statewide standardized assessments that students are given are really more about telling kind of school leaders and policymakers how many kids are not reaching the expectation for reading comprehension, or like, let's say for math, like maybe like you can't pass your algebra exam. So it tells you this student can't pass your algebra exam. But what it doesn't tell you is why the student didn't pass the algebra exam. And so that's the same for these standardized assessments in reading as well. Is, they're measuring reading comprehension, and you can see like, okay, 50% of our kids didn't meet a proficient standard on reading comprehension, but that doesn't give you any insight into why. And we know that there are lots of different reasons that a student might not be able to pass that reading comprehension. For some kids, it is going to be things like they do not have the foundational reading skills that they need. They are still working on decoding. For other students, it might be that they can decode a word, but they haven't gotten to the next step of being able to like find meaning in the words that they're reading, right? And those are really different things. And so for teachers, when they're looking at the test scores of their students from the previous year, they're getting just a really rough look at like, okay, these students passed and these students didn't, and they're not getting any information on like the actual skills that their students have or need to develop. And so that's where those kind of assessments, like Rebecca mentioned, can give teachers the kind of granular insight they need to help students get to the point that when they take another reading comprehension exam, they can pass that. And it's because they've developed whatever skills they needed to develop so that when they're given a passage, they can answer a set of 5 questions about the passage. It's just there's a lot that goes on underneath a student being able to read a passage and answer 5 questions. And that is not really the intention of those state assessments, to be fair. But it also means that we shouldn't be relying on them as like a tool for teachers. It's really more kind of a benchmarking tool for the public or for principals or district leaders to kind of get a quick look at like, okay, how many kids passed and how many kids didn't.
Yeah, so it's really multi-component, right? This is not an isolated type of thing where we could say, well, if we only get this one thing, all our problems will be solved. It's really looking at this holistically and seeing and understanding that it's a multi-component process, and as such, we have to treat it that way and really see all the different parts. So to wrap up, this was a great conversation because we have been talking, Judy and I have had a series of podcasts really about adolescent literacy. And although we're starting here in 3rd grade, it's really about the older student, the older striving reader. And, we could start at 3rd grade, we could start at middle school. The idea is we pass that window of K to 2, and all of these episodes are about that. So something really exciting that Judy and I are going to be doing. We're going to actually do a recap of everything and debrief together as a podcast. So between the two of us, and I'm really looking forward to that. So to wrap up, any last thoughts, Anna, Rebecca, Judy, anybody, anything you want to just add to the conversation that we have not discussed? Anna's done. She said she feels she said everything she could. Rebecca?
Just that I'm so grateful and glad to have had the chance to share this study with you, but also to see adolescent and middle and upper elementary school literacy get some attention because it really needs it.
Yes, indeed. We feel the same way. Judy, so wrap up for us, honey. Let's go.
All right, so join Faith and I in England. We're going to England for the World Literacy Summit 2025. Yay! At Oxford University. Anyway, join us on our Facebook group, the Real Teachers Letting Loose Facebook group. When you see our episodes, the biggest compliment is when you share it in other groups and with your friends. Follow us on Instagram. Please reshare our stuff. Share it with your network. And we're changing lives one view at a time. Also, theliteracyview.com is our website. You can now donate to the Literacy View because podcasting is not free. And also you can advertise with the Literacy View. So if you want us to play an advertisement or a clip mid-roll, at the beginning, voiceovers, we're ready to do that. So contact us. Thank you. Changing lives one view at a time. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.